All right, welcome back. Our conversation continues on the aftermath of the deadly Sabasaba protests and where we go from here, which is, I suppose, the right place to begin this second part of our conversation with you, Martha. What is the way out of the place we find ourselves in?
Before I talk of the way out, Yvonne, this evening I'm receiving reports that ununiformed people who could be security officers, all part of the militias of yesterday, have been dropped all over the towns where there was trouble yesterday, in Mwea, in Roiro, in Thika, in Rongai, and I don't know where else. How will people believe that these are security officers and not militias who have come to visit more terror on them? We have to really ask, when a regime sets out state-sponsored militias, do they have control anymore? Can they guarantee people of security? So where we go from here, the message is clear. Kenyans, we are on our own. And I said Kenyans of goodwill have to come together and chart a way forward. We've been speaking, and even today we spoke as politicians. The human rights people will speak as human rights defenders. The religious groups will speak as religious groups, and other Kenyans of goodwill. Can we sit together and seek to find solutions? Because we are on our own.
So what does that sitting together look like? Because there have been a couple of suggestions. Raila Odinga, a man with whom you were in the trenches with 35 years ago during the initial Sabasaba movement, has called for what he calls an intergenerational national conclave. And then we've heard of the calls for but we'll get to the Transitional Council in a moment, but when you say sit together and talk, Raila is seemingly suggesting something similar. So how would this talks happen in your view?
I don't think we are together on that one.
Okay.
There is the broad-based or blood-based government on one side, and there's the people of Kenya on the other side. I am talking about the people of Kenya, not a blood-based government that is soaked in the blood of Kenyans. Yeah. So you cannot dialogue with somebody who has put a foot on your throat. And by choosing to identify with the boot, the person putting the boot on the throat of Kenyans, then that voice does not sound the same to me as it sounded before. So I talked of Kenyans of goodwill. So his voice is masked by the voice of the blood-based government.
So what would sitting together
just to harmonize
of goodwill, in your view, what does that look like?
So that we harmonize and we get a timetable for actions, for the measures that should be taken. If you look at the United Opposition statement today, it is making certain suggestions, including boycott of businesses associated with the blood-based government, including deciding whether or not to pay taxes or to go to work. A raft of measures ought to be decided. There are many ways of bringing this rogue regime to its knees without offering more blood.
And so how would this be done? I don't know if there has been some thought or reflection on your part as the United Kenya Opposition outfit, as you call yourselves. How would this work? What would be the framework? Who would be at these talks? And how would that proceed?
I have said there are two groups in Kenya. On one side, there's a blood-based government, the rogue regime. And on the other are Kenyans. So Kenyans of goodwill.
So how do they then organize themselves?
But how did the Gen Zs organize themselves? There are many ways of people harmonizing their thoughts so that a majority are of one mind. And we've seen it everywhere. People don't meet as a general meeting. There are many ways of communicating, but we need to take action. And action that, is broadly agreed upon, because the issues are stopping the bloodletting of Kenyans, freeing Kenyans to express themselves, getting the security forces paid by our taxes to work for us.
And in what way do you think that can happen? And perhaps the reason I'm asking this is because with everything we've seen for the last year, from June 2024 to date, there still seems to be no, coming down on the other end. So in what ways do you think that we can move forward and start to say, what you're saying about getting, security officers to be held accountable for excesses, solving issues such as unemployment or the economic issues and the cost of living? In what way does that happen that hasn't happened, for instance, over the last year?
We will not get any good thing coming from the rogue regime. That's a given, because they are the ones who could have changed by listening to Kenyans. So we have to ask ourselves, now that they defy not only the Constitution, the will of the majority, and they are determined to even take away sanctity of life of the people, what do we do? How do we bring them to their knees, the operations to their knees? So it is not about getting this regime to do anything. It's about getting Kenyans to be able to rescue themselves from this terror and tyranny of the William Ruto-led regime.
In what way can there be lasting solutions? We've had history of talks in this country. We've been talking, but rarely produce lasting solutions. To the extent that there is much apathy amongst the youth in terms of bringing people around a table. If you recall, I think last year, right after the protests, the president tried to call for what he called a 100-member council, and there was supposed to be young people in there. That didn't go too far. In fact, it didn't even get started. But how do we get lasting solutions? How do we not find ourselves in this position? There was Sabasaba 35 years ago, made great strides, repeal of Section 2A, multi-party democracy. But it would seem, like you said, even at the start of this conversation, that many of the issues we're facing today are still the ones that you were clamoring for 35 years ago. So where is that pathway towards some sort of lasting solution? So we're dealing with different problems every time rather than the same ones.
We are dealing with a heartless and ruthless regime led by a heartless and ruthless person in the name of Dr. William Ruto. We call the KANU era and the Moi era the dark days. The distinction between today and those days is that whenever the nation was faced with a serious crisis and at the brink of disintegration, Moi always used to retreat a step back and have genuine listening to the people and an attempt to bring solutions. And that's how we came to the multi-party era. This is a different ballgame. This is a regime that is tone deaf. To expect anything from it is to daydream. We had NADCO, which was supposed to be for 90 days. They dragged for a year. Implementation took another year. There is no way we can go back to meaningless dialogue, which will not be with the blood-based regime.
So you don't want any form of talks with this administration?
I personally would not. But people should come together and make a collective decision on what steps to take. There are many ways, it's been done elsewhere, of forcing a regime to its knees. Remember, the people are sovereign. The regime depends on the toil of the citizens. What if citizens decided not to go to work for a week? And you might ask, those who live hand to mouth, what will they eat?
Yeah.
Those who live hand to mouth yesterday were starved by the regime. There are many, many ways of doing it, that even if the ones in employment are the ones downing the tools, there are many ways of forcing the economy to the regime to come to its knees. Yesterday, it actually enforced a total downing of tools. People lost, businesses lost, and even those that were not opened, they still paid militias to go and destroy.
So
we have to think, what can we do? Can we continue this way?
So you're calling for a crippling of the economy?
I'm not saying that we starve ourselves, but there's a way that we can do it. We can sacrifice. And that has to be, I'm not prescribing, but there are many ways of doing it. And yes, one of them is denying them revenue. Even when we say boycott, it's denying those businesses revenue. It is possible, and it can be done. But I'm not here to prescribe, and I've said before, it can be done. I didn't know during the Azimio, Raila-led Azimio demonstrations, I was still saying we could do it. I didn't know how. Then came the Gen Zs with a method that we didn't know, more successful than we've ever been. Kenyans are not only innovative, they are also resilient. And I know ideas will flow from Kenyans of goodwill on how to turn around this untenable situation.
One of the avenues to that could perhaps be through Parliament, that is a representation of the people. There's a question here regarding what you think could be the role of Parliament, perhaps into the situation we find ourselves now, and if it is one of the avenues to use to get ourselves out of this process we find ourselves in. So providing oversight, representation, and legislation, including the option to impeach a president.
Parliament abandoned its role long ago. They are largely in the pocket of Dr. William Ruto and his rogue regime. And the Speaker is gone. He's no longer Speaker of Parliament, he's Speaker of William Ruto. Now, what I would suggest is that Parliament can actually redeem itself. And even the few who speak for the people, because I have to admit there are few voices who speak for the people, they can initiate impeachment.
Is this something that, as the United Kenya opposition, there is...
All these cards are on the
some membership,
table.
Perhaps not the majority, but some would ask, would this not be an avenue, a legal one?
Parliament has to be left to make its own decisions, even when the party can whisper, but the parliamentary group has to come to its decisions. And this is one of the things, an impeachment motion. Whether successful or not, it offers a chance to ventilate, sensitize Kenyans and the world of what is going on. And that's why I'm saying there are many, many ways. And according to the Rome Statute, proceedings can be initiated, not just at The Hague, but even here nationally. There are many ways. About calling the rogue police officers or security agents to account, it is possible for those identified to also get them before the courts of law. There are many, a raft of things which can be done. We need to pull our synergies together and break away into groups that can do things. And it is very sad that even human rights defenders like the Kenya Human Rights Commission can be vandalized and attacked by state militias, like it was done on Sunday, when the mothers of the victims of the violence, state-sponsored violence, when they are to make a presser. And I would want Kenyans to know that the tally of our Constitutional Commission, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, is that as of today, they're talking of 31 dead, and so many injured, over 109 injured, and over 400 taken, arrested. And we have seen that the people who are being arrested is people from opposition areas, from Machakos, from Kirinyaga, from Nairobi, and I am aware that since the 25th of June, from all Kalau, from Nakuru, from Rongai, all those areas that are opposition dominated. Yet goons who have been captured by the mainstream media as well as social media are free. Officers who have shot at close range, only a handful when there's too much noise, are being arraigned in court. The rest are scot-free. So we are on our own, and we have to devise ways. The fact that it has not been done before, there can always be a first. We have to find a way of getting this regime on its knees to pave way for Kenyans to live a decent life of human beings, to express their rights, and to be relieved from the yoke of oppression. Because it appears that Dr. William Ruto and his regime are determined not only to oppress, but to take as many lives as they can.
For some who are listening tonight, and to some of your thoughts or reflections on how this can be handled, would say, Martha, that you are calling for anarchy, you're calling for bringing down the economy, and there are those who say they've lost property, there's been violence and destruction of property, looting that goes unchecked, and that by your prescriptions here today, or some of your recommendations, that you are calling for anarchy, bringing down the economy, and destabilizing the country. What would you say?
Meeting to talk about Kenya, is that anarchy? That's what I would ask. Because even by the wildest imagination, coming together to discuss as Kenyans cannot be called as anarchy. Anarchy is the people who are supposed to be keeping the nation safe, using a specialized squad of police officers and civilians to actually terrorize the people. That is anarchy. So for me, the anarchists are the people who are in power, a small clique of elite, who are misusing the security apparatus. Other forms of picketing, that's not anarchy. That's using the tools that are constitutionally available. The protesters and all the opposition leaders, none has caused destruction. Destruction has been sponsored and caused by the state, but they would wish to wipe it off, the opposition. You cannot frighten the people to the extent that when people call for boycott, you call it anarchy. Yet, you are sending people to set businesses ablaze. Those businesses, how can they rely on the protection of the state anymore? I am sure people will find their own ways of protecting their businesses. I am saying time has come for us to come together and seek solutions. And I repeat, I'm not here to prescribe. And repeat, Kenyans coming together away from the blood-based government to discuss solutions is not anarchy. It's being active and engaged citizens. It's being patriotic. Standing up for the rights of each other is being patriotic. Anarchy is when a rogue regime sends the guns you bought to protect you, to take away your life. I would like actually to say pole sana to Mama Bridget in Kiambu, a 12-year-old shot in the safety of their home, the home made insecure by officers. And that's not the only life lost at home. In many other places, people have been shot coming from work or at their workplaces. That is what I call anarchy. And that is why we are saying this is state-sponsored militia, Haiti-like, trying. William Ruto and his rogue regime are trying to dismember, to destroy Kenya.
When we saw the start of the protests in June last year, I think one thing that was clear from the youth when they were out on the streets, when they were speaking their minds online, was an overwhelming sense of betrayal by the political class in general, the political class of which you are a part.
Yeah.
Do you feel a sense of responsibility of this betrayal that the young people feel in this country as a member of the political class?
Generally, yes, but specifically, no. Wherever I have held a position of authority, and even now that all I hold is a position in a political party and my agency as a person, I have done my bit. I can be able to account any time for any space I have held. But if you're talking generally, yes, generally, the political class has failed. But I want Kenyans to know that they've also failed themselves. You hold the power of the vote. And sometimes Kenyans have collectively voted unsuitable people like the ones, a majority of whom we have in power today. It is time we use our power of the vote, our agency properly to rescue our country.
When Kenyans look at, so today, the United Kenya opposition stood up and, of course, condemned the extrajudicial violence that we have seen amongst many of the ills, I think, that we've seen during the protests. But there is a section of the young people who will look at, the spectrum of the people who are standing there and condemning that violence and saying, well, some of them are part of the problem. Not too long ago, the former deputy president was part of this very regime, and he was calling for shareholding and certain people who need to wait in line before they can get their fair share of the pie. There are several others there against whom some aspersions have been cast. Not guilty, but there have been questions about corruption, about extrajudicial killings, even within the last regime. We all remember the bodies that were turning up in Rivayala, and yet some of the people who you were standing with there were cabinet secretaries at the time in charge of that. And so there's a sense in which young people will look at that and say, well, are these people who are with us, or is there a sense in which you're hijacking the movement of the young people?
I would want first to remind you that Dr. William Ruto was a deputy president in that regime, because people seem to see the opposition and forget that the person now sitting at the helm was part of that, or that, let me not go where I was going, but let me say this, that I would want, because this is a media house with access to all these people. Ask me questions concerning Martha Karua. I will account.
I'm asking
But do not ask me to be a judge of my brothers. Each one of them can explain themselves. I am not going to sit here to explain about any of my colleagues.
All right.
I will tell you.
I need to ask you, though.
I will tell you.
No, not about them.
Yes.
But about your association with them. Is that an association that you are proud of and that you would want to be with and that you think is possibly the one that could, you said you're not here to prescribe solutions, that is fine.
Yeah.
But do you then believe that you provide an alternative, at least, to what we see? Because for what Kenyans see is that these are the same faces, with all due respect to you, Madam Karua, as yours as well, that have been, in leadership of this country for the last couple of decades, and say, well, it's the same, and positions change based on political inclinations during every election cycle.
Yes and no. The faces are the same. We are all seeking leadership, the top leadership positions. That means you have a menu to choose from, and each candidate will explain themselves. I am not going to be the mother hen to carry my colleagues on my back and explain for them. There are dots. Shoot questions to each one of us, and find whether among us you find worthy people who can bring transformation to this country. And it is not only those of us who are in that group. There will be many others. Kenyans must utilize their role, their agency, to hold leadership to account. But Kenyans also must use their power of the vote and their agency correctly by identifying people who can truly transform. And it's easy to pick that. Look at the spaces each one of us has held. I'll be able to answer you questions of the spaces I've been, whether I've followed the rule of law, whether I've been accountable, whether I have delivered. Every person must be asked that. If that is the test that had been applied in 2012, we would not be having Dr. William Ruto presiding over a blood-based regime in this country. We would be having better leadership. We would not be having members of parliament. Not all of them are bad, but we would not be having a parliament where a majority turn their backs on the people and work at the behest of a rogue regime. And I want to say that we have a responsibility. Whichever place you occupy, whether as a voter, whether as a person in charge of security agencies, in charge of any government agency or a public agency, please remember the Constitution is clear. You work for the people of Kenya. Even if your appointment is signed by somebody else, it's on behalf of the people of Kenya. Obey the Constitution. Look at the interests of the people, not the interests of a leader. Leaders are transient. They come and go. The people remain. And let us all take our responsibility seriously.
Let's focus on police reforms, because that's of course one of the things that's now in the forefront, considering the events we've had in the country lately, and particularly over the last year. We have attempted police reforms several times. In 2004, 2005, there was the Kibaki Task Force on Police Reforms. In 2009, of course, after what happened in 2007, 2008, we had the Philip Ransley Task Force. That, of course, led to the Constitution. Great. We had IPOA, we have the National Police Service. Then in 2012, the then Cabinet Secretary Olelenku spearheaded some structural reforms. Then we had the PRIC of 2010. We had, of course, now the latest, which is the Maraga Task Force. What is the challenge? We've been doing this. We've thrown billions of shillings. In fact, I think collectively that would be well over 200 billion shillings in reforms. And yet we still have the same repeated cycles of violence and impunity.
In this country,
what's the challenge?
People have taken reforms. I've been in government and I've seen a majority take reforms as the physical. New cars, new uniform, seminars where you get a per diem. Those are the reforms. But the actual actions are not taken seriously. If it's violation of rights, whether in prisons, whether by police officers, if it is actions by judicial officers, you'll only see some working properly. Others, you'll still see the same corrupt ways. So we need a reset. And we need leadership in all institutions that drives the reform agenda seriously. And for those of us who held positions, you must check. Anybody who has presided over a ministry or institution, check whether what they did to clean up. Reform orientation is not one act or two acts or three. It's a series of the things culminating, which can give you a direction whether a leader can drive reform or not. Yeah.
I mean, so what is it? Because I think collectively we've talked about
it's lack of political will, lack of the will to reform, and reform is led from the top. And I learned that when I participated in government, I drove the reforms in the Ministry of Water, but I couldn't drive beyond the Ministry of Water. I'm Minister for Justice, coordinating the justice sector. I can pronounce policy, but I cannot preside over my fellow ministers. Only the president can. So if you see reforms not moving, know that the president has no time for the reforms. So the first part of the Kibaki government, you saw reforms moving. There was total commitment. The second part, when it became a grand coalition, even characters appointed to government who were not fit according to the Public Officers Ethics Act, then you see the reforms starting to drop, the rate of the reforms, and almost grinding to a stale. So it's about leadership. Leadership matters in matters of governance, in matters of reform. And reforming is a very tiring and thankless duty. You really have to have the determination to drive the reform agenda. By coordinating, checking, you don't have to do it yourself. You rely on the human resource. But the supervision, you have to be present.
Yeah. Yeah. In line with that, and I want to get to some questions that we have our viewers asking as well. So it takes leadership. You've said you do not believe that the current president is a man who...
And his cabinet.
Okay, who need to be in office and who can take this country forward. If Ruto must go happens, whether now 2027, by whatever means, hopefully legally, then what?
Kenyans will decide who takes over the mantle. May I remind you that Bangladesh was able, without anything, to appoint Yunus of the Grameen Bank to lead, and we have not had a problem in Bangladesh. They're moving on. They didn't go to an election to get Yunus. But when they wanted to bring the army, the public said no. Not through an electoral system, but they were able to identify who they want. It is possible. It is possible to change leadership through the ballot. And in Kenya, it is also possible to change leadership through the exercise, through impeachment in parliament, but also through Article 1, exercise of direct power by the people. Let us not ignore that. Let us not say it has never happened. It can happen, and it will be legitimate. Yeah.
Do you believe you would provide better leadership in this country?
Definitely, but the decision of who can provide better leadership is not a personal thing. In fact, those who seek leadership, we must humble ourselves to the decision of the people. I may think I'm the best. If people think otherwise, I must give way to what the people think. I am not the one who has sacked William Ruto. It is the people of Kenya who, through coming out of 37 counties, collectively told him, you and your regime, your shelf life has expired. So we must give way to the collective will of the people. And the sovereignty of the people means the collective, not the individual. And therefore, whether you have been elected overwhelmingly or marginally, when the people loudly express, and I keep on saying, in developed democracies, a government would not resort to killing. It would actually resign and pave way. But we are seeing a ruling elite that has no respect for the people or the Constitution, because not respecting people's voices, resorting to murder to sustain yourself in power as a ruling elite is total contempt, not only for human life, but for the voices of the people. It is you and me as Kenyans who will build our democracy to the point where leaders will listen to the voice of the people. And I keep asking, what would I do if I was the one?
What would you do?
You might think you have worked your best, but if people think otherwise, you must leave. We saw Thabo Mbeki leaving leadership in South Africa when his party recalled him. And for those of us who are looking, he had done such a great job. But he respected the wishes of the people. So even if you feel that perhaps you have been misunderstood, you still must give way.
Is that a standard you hold yourself to?
Yes. And remember, I resigned voluntarily as a cabinet minister, losing almost half of my salary, privilege, and power. But voluntarily saying, because I am not comfortable with what is going on within government, I remove myself from that government. And at that time, ministers were members of parliament. I returned to the back benches and I became a robust member of the back bench. Yeah.
Before we get to this question, I just wanted to ask you one thing. There's been calls for a what they're calling a transitional council or transitional government that would sort of be a caretaker and that sort of thing and lead us to the next. What do you think of a proposal
All those are ideas, and I said they are coming from civil society. We have suggestions as members of the opposition. The religious leaders have a voice, and other Kenyans, professionals and others. Them should be a coming together to exchange those ideas, to have them explained more, and to collectively adopt a way out of where we are. Yeah.
Here is one question. From Kipleting, Manuela says, the opposition has been calling for President Ruto's resignation. What solution is opposition offering if the president was to go today? Who would oversee the elections as IEBC is totally unprepared?
I have already explained that the people can be able to even appoint that IEBC through direct exercise of power. It has not been done before. I am not here to say how it will be done. I'm sure in Bangladesh, the people had not chased a president out of the country before. But it so happened, and they were able to say no. And maybe their constitution does not even explain as ours does. But in our democratic tradition, even where the constitution does not say so, power belongs to the people. Democracy is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. The people have a final say.
Yeah, but they delegate that, through their representatives.
Yes.
What you're calling for
in
people
Kenya,
to reconstitute IEBC?
Even Kenya, it is done directly. And I said, Yvonne, that the people of Bangladesh chose Yunus, not in an election. I do not know whether they communicate on the mtandao like Kenyans, but we know that in a way and in unison, they said Yunus, and the army gave way, and Yunus came and selected his team. I have not followed to see how they are going, but it's quiet. We haven't heard of anything. So it is possible. The fact that it has not been done, if yesterday, before 2024 June, if someone had suggested that there could be an awakening of the youth of Kenya, and that they could come to the streets in a very patriotic spirit and peacefully expressing themselves, we would have said it's not possible. All we knew is demonstrations by the opposition, and the largest ones being organized and led by Raila Odinga. The Gen Z have since surpassed that. Actually, they are organizing better than any political player. So if you were told before that time, you would say no. If you were told before then that a regime, that Dr. William Ruto or any other person sitting there would sack cabinet because people have demanded it, you wouldn't have believed. How did the Gen Z or Kenyans communicate that we are tired of your government? It's not letters they wrote to him. He listened. How do those who resign because of public demand know that? Either through the media, the media is always one of the channels. And anybody who is not tone deaf will very quickly pick what the people are saying. So it is possible.
There is a question here from Dick Kariuki who asks, does Martha recommend a review of the Constitution as a first step?
No. Nothing wrong with the Constitution to be the first item. What is wrong is our behavior our attitude, and especially the ruling elite, that you would rather you killed Kenyans extrajudicially, you would rather starve Kenyans to pamper the ruling elite. You ignore completely the interests of Kenyans and take the state as personal property, where you pamper yourselves, where you trample on the rights of everyone, and you fight to retain the position instead of honorably giving way. For whom do you preside over the affairs of the state? Is it on behalf of your family? Is it on behalf of your friends? Or is it on behalf of Kenyans? If it's on behalf of Kenyans, and Kenyans say no to you, you give way. And yesterday, I saw the media count that there were protests in 17 counties. I don't think that is correct. There was a blockade virtually the whole country. It's even a wonder that the media can count 17. Remove the blockade if you want to assess. Maybe from 37 we'll go to 47 counties. And this is not me speaking, because I have no control over those counties. We also get to know when the media counts. Let us accept that this is the most unpopular regime that has ever been in Kenya. It's also the one that has violated the human rights of Kenyans and shown contempt of the people in the worst way possible. Contempt for life and for human dignity. How can you drag on the floor a person you have just shot dead? The contempt shown in the murder of Boniface Kariuki, the same contempt in the murder of 31 people yesterday. And we are still counting.
Final words, where do we go from here? How do we get there?
I am saying that the responsibility of rescuing our country from further disintegration is on us collectively. And there are two sides in this matter: the blood-based regime, rogue regime, and the people of Kenya. Let people of goodwill put their heads together and let us find a solution. Let us not talk each from their corner. We need everybody in this so that we can save our country. Do not listen to polarization by the regime that wants to create the narrative that this is an uprising by the people of a certain corner. This is about Kenya. And even when you kill in the Mount Kenya region, without knowing, you kill people from all places in Kenya, because Kenyans are one and they are everywhere. When you kill in Kisumu, you will find that you have killed more than the people of Kisumu. Like in Nyalenda, they expected everybody living there was a Luo. They killed 2 Luhya brothers. So what I'm saying, we are one. No wonder the hashtag, we are all Kikuyu, is trending. To mean, don't say it's a Kikuyu uprising. It's Kenyans who are unhappy. Shah Chief is affecting every Kenyan from every corner of Kenya. Extrajudicial killings and abductions affecting everybody. Defunding of education and other essential services affecting everybody. Running down the economy, joblessness affecting every Kenyan. These are the real-life solutions we must find answers to, including leadership, because it's all about leadership. Let us do this together, Kenyans. It's about us.
Martha Karua, party leader of the People's Liberation Party, thank you for making time for us on the program tonight. And hopefully the 36th commemoration of Sabasaba will be different from what we saw this year. Thank you very much for making the time for us.
Thank you.
On the program tonight. There you are. That's where we leave it at. Thank you for watching The Explainer tonight and every night. Have a good night. We shall see you again soon. Bye-bye.